We're looking forward to hearing your testimony, and I want to congratulate you again on your recent confirmation. As we all know, watching the Senate, that's no small feat, so well done. Since the subcommittee last met to discuss the Department of Education budget last year, Congress achieved the significant and long overdue accomplishment of reauthorizing federal K-12 education programs through the Every Student Succeeds Act. This legislation streamlined and improved many of the department's programs and devolved much of the authority over K-12 education issues to the states and school districts, and was tremendous bipartisan and bicameral achievement. The next step is to support states and school districts in their new role by providing sufficient resources to help them build capacity. I have concerns about whether your budget request for fiscal year 2017 for the key formula and block grant programs that support all states and school districts, including IDEA, Title I, and the new Student Support and Academic Enrichment State Grant, is sufficient to successfully implement the new law. In addition, you propose or over $7 billion in mandatory spending that the subcommittee has neither the authority nor the inclination to implement. We'll have to remain in the discretionary allocation that the full committee ultimately allocates to the subcommittee. With regard to higher education, the department plays an important role not only in assisting students to finance higher education, but also in helping them to prepare for, complete, and succeed in their studies. I was happy that we were able to maintain funding for Pell Grants and provide a significant increase for TRIO and Gear Up in fiscal year 2016. I look forward to hearing more about your proposals to make higher education more attainable and affordable to students most in need in the upcoming year. I look forward to having a discussion with you this morning to identify your top priorities for the year so that we can invest the American taxpayer dollars in the wisest way given our funding constraints. As a reminder to the subcommittee and to our witnesses, we'll abide by the 5-minute rule so that everyone will have a chance to get their questions asked and answered. I'd now like to yield to my good friend, the ranking member of the full committee, the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Loy, for any opening remarks she cares to make.
And I want to thank our committee chair for your leadership of this committee. It's a pleasure to be here today. And before I begin, Mr. Chairman, I want to note that Tom Skelly, the highly respected CFO at the department, is making his last appearance before the subcommittee today. You've been an indispensable resource, 42 years in government service, I understand. We congratulate you on your much-deserved retirement, and we wish you the very best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Loy.
Okay, so for today's students to be successful in the 21st century economy, we need a renewed focus that will enable them to compete in the global market. It is imperative that implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act be swift and thorough. And I know, Secretary King, you're aware of Common Core. I think we've had many discussions about that. And we know that in New York, policies can succeed or elsewhere or fail based on their implementation. It is my hope that with the ESSA, we can learn from what has worked and what has failed to ensure that this new law provides students, teachers, parents, and administrators with the tools to provide children with the best education possible. I know you care deeply, Mr. Secretary, about this mission. I look forward to hearing your testimony on how we can best achieve it. In December, this committee came together to make sizable investments, particularly in K-12 education. Among those were increases in Title I grants to school districts for students in need, as well as increases in IDEA special education funds. Still, much work remains, and we must build on last year's effort. You come before us today with a budget request that would provide the Department of Education with an increase of 2%, or about $1.3 billion. Your budget includes advances in computer science, STEM, career technical training to help students gain the tools to smoothly transition to the workforce. I am pleased that the President has proposed measures to increase college affordability, such as year-round Pell and bonus incentives for students to take additional credits. Together, these initiatives will help low-income students increase graduation rates and reduce debt, all while allowing them to enter the workforce faster, increasing their earnings and stimulating our local economy. The President's Pell initiatives are a win-win, and I hope that Congress acts to make these proposals a reality for students. However, as you know, Pell is not available to everyone. That is why the federal student loan programs, including direct loans, Perkin loans, federal work-study, are so vital. Student loan debt is not just a check that's written at the end of the month. It's a weight on the shoulders of those trying to build a career and can make it more difficult for hardworking Americans to save for a home, for retirement, and one day to pay for college for children of their own. I look forward to hearing more from you on how we can increase college affordability and reduce the debt burden on our students. Lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention your proposed cuts to after-school programs. For many students, particularly in underserved areas, funding through the 21st Century Community Learning Centers provides after-school enrichment and a safe place for students to learn and develop their skills. I would like to hear from you on what led to this proposed cut, especially when additional after-school programs are badly needed in communities throughout the country. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlelady. Next, before I want to make a point, and then I want to go to my friend Mr. Fattah, who's effectively acting ranking member today. But I know you're aware of this, Secretary, but we have 3 members traveling with the President today, so that's why attendance is a little bit sparse. They're 3 of our most dedicated members that are almost always here, but they trust Mr. Fattah so much that they've left him single-handedly to hold us all off. So with that, I recognize my very good friend from Pennsylvania for whatever opening remarks he cares to make.
I thank the chairman, and I thank him moreover for his leadership on many of the issues affecting education we've worked together on over the years. And one area is Gear Up, and I'd be interested in hearing. I know that the proposed $69.4 billion budget would hold Gear Up at a whole harmless number from last year, but last year's number was an increase, in part because of many people on the committee supported, but mainly because the chairman was prepared to hold the line on that increase. And I was out in Oklahoma at the University of Oklahoma and saw some of the Gear Up kids in a pre-engineering program. Just doing a fabulous job. So I'm going to be very interested. This is the nation's largest early college awareness program. I authored it some 17 years ago. Millions of young people have benefited. The graduation rates are above the national average, the college completion rates. I'm interested in where the department may go, in as much as it's a great program, but it's still at the margins. That is that we still have so many of our young people in schools that are not benefiting from a program like Gear Up, and we still have a need, as the President's laid out, to return the nation to being the #1 nation in the world producing college-educated adults. So we have a program that works. It works in rural communities, urban communities. It works particularly among populations that we've had challenges with in terms of educational access to educational opportunity and therefore attainment. So I'm interested in where you sense we can go in terms of creating a college-going culture in communities that heretofore haven't benefited from even our most successful efforts like Gear Up. Now, I've worked with the administration on the American Opportunity Tax Credit, and I sponsored the bill that created it in 2009. It's helped millions of people and put billions in the pockets of families that pay for college costs. And I know that we have now made it permanent in the tax code, which is a major achievement, in a partnership between the Congress and the administration to make another $10,000 available. It's not coming out of the education budget. It's coming via the IRS, but it is part of the puzzle of the maximum Pell, the tax credit, the work study. But as the ranking a member from New York, Nita Lowy, said, we also have to deal with loan repayment issues. So it may come as a surprise to some, but we tucked into the Affordable Care Act when we passed it a loan repayment plan that allowed young people to have parts of their loan forgiven to the degree that they engage in public service. If they join the local police department, or they become a teacher, or a local public servant in some capacity, and they can have a fifth of their loan retired each year that they serve in a public-spirited opportunity in their local community. And I want to hear more about where we are and having that be known to more young people and be taken, for them to take advantage of. And the last question is around, and it's going to be part of your prepared testimony, I understand, but this whole question of equity. You know, how we, and you came out of the New York circumstance, so you know all too well that young people in our rural and urban communities still have the least of everything that we know they need in order to get an education than those in our wealthiest suburban communities. And so I'm interested in the department's efforts in this regard. We want to welcome you today, and I thank the chairman.
Thank the gentleman, and Mr. Secretary, it is indeed a great pleasure to have you here today, and you're recognized for whatever opening comments you'd care to make.
Thanks so much. Chairman Cole, Ranking Member Lowy, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to discuss the department's 2017 budget, the first under the new Every Student Succeeds Act. I look forward to building on our bipartisan collaboration as we implement ESSA and work to address our biggest challenges in education. Increasing equity and excellence in public education has been my life's work. Before joining the department, I led the New York State Department of Education and served with Uncommon Schools, a network of high-achieving charter schools. I began my career as a high school social studies teacher and co-founded one of the highest-performing urban middle schools in Massachusetts. I'm also the proud parent of 2 public school students. These experiences inform and inspire every decision I make at the department. This year, the agency is focused on 3 principles, which reflect themes in our budget. First, ensuring every child has the opportunity to access a quality education. Second, supporting our nation's teachers and elevating the teaching profession. And third, improving access, affordability, and completion in higher education. Allow me to take each of these in turn. The budget invests in programs to increase educational equity so all children, regardless of background, native language, zip code, or disability, can achieve their potential. For example, the budget ensures our youngest learners get a strong start through President Obama's landmark Preschool for All initiative. In addition, the HHS budget increases funding for the jointly administered preschool development grants. To help close opportunity gaps, the request provides $15.4 billion for Title I, the cornerstone of the federal effort to ensure all students, especially our most vulnerable, graduate from high school prepared for college and careers. The Computer Science for All proposals would advance comprehensive state and local efforts to offer rigorous coursework for all students, with a focus on those who've been underrepresented in the STEM fields. The budget also would support community efforts to improve the educational and life outcomes for children and youth. The request increases funding for the Promised Neighborhoods program, for example, as well as Native Youth Community Projects, which supports community-driven, comprehensive strategies to improve the college and career readiness of our Native children. Through our Stronger Together initiative, we would help local leaders create more high-achieving, socioeconomically diverse classrooms and schools. And in today's knowledge-based economy, we know we must do more to provide students with rigorous and relevant learning experiences. Consequently, the budget includes proposals for next-generation high schools and career and technical education that will prepare students to transition to post-secondary education and real jobs by engaging in project-based learning, having the opportunity to earn early college credit, and building career-ready competencies. Recognizing that educators are nation builders and vital to our children's success, the budget invests to recruit, develop, support, and retain outstanding teachers and school leaders. The Teacher and Principal Pathways program would strengthen our pipeline of effective educators, while Teach to Lead grants would capitalize on teachers' leadership for education improvement. And to help educators advance through their careers, the budget supports innovations in human capital management systems in several programs, namely the Teacher and School Leader Incentive Fund. We also are proposing Respect, Best Job in the World, to rethink ways to structure teaching in high-need schools to attract and retain effective teachers where we need them most. The programs in our 2017 budget also would make higher education more affordable and help additional students earn quality degrees. America's College Promise would make 2 years of community college free for responsible students. This budget also would drive innovations in Pell Grants by supporting students who take classes year-round, rewarding those who take at least 15 credits per semester, and rewarding institutions with high enrollment and completion rates for Pell Grant recipients. While this budget is focused on helping to meet challenges, I also want to acknowledge our country's remarkable gains. High school graduation rates are an all-time high, and dropout rates are decreasing. We have seen the largest and most diverse class completing higher education in our history. This budget leverages local leadership, the source of strength for our nation's education system, to help more students thrive from preschool through college. Throughout our proposals and programs, we are committed to using and developing evidence and data to maximize results for students and taxpayers. The Department's 2017 budget would support local and state-led efforts to ensure in every community and in every school, students know that their education can provide them with the knowledge and skills to achieve their greatest aspirations. I look forward to discussing these ideas with you in more detail and would be glad to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Let me begin the questioning. I'm concerned about the Department's request to reduce funding for the more traditional grants in the TRIO program to make room for an additional or proposed $20 million demonstration project. As I know you're aware, there's broad bipartisan bicameral support for TRIO, as these programs are effective in improving access to and the completion of higher education for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. What's the issue or the concern with TRIO programs that the department hopes to address through this proposed demonstration project?
Yeah, the hope with the demonstration project is really to build on the success of the TRIO programs. We see TRIO and Gear Up as critical to our nation's effort to try and get back to first in the world in college completion. We do think evidence is critical to that, and the demonstration project gives us the opportunity to build in an evaluation process that would generate evidence about what works most effectively in TRIO programs that would then inform the rest of the TRIO investment. But as you point out, it's a relatively small investment in the context of the overall funding level for TRIO.
Can you give me a little bit more in the way of specifics in terms of what the evidence is, what are we looking for, and how we go about doing that in the proposal?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, this builds on the work that we've done with what's now called the Education, Innovation, and Research program within the Every Student Succeeds Act. The idea that we ought to do either randomized controlled trial or quasi-experimental design research to try to produce good evidence about best practices that then can inform work that's happening across our programs. So, for example, there have been research efforts that have shown that exposing students in particular to other first-generation college students like them who can talk about their experience from a personal perspective is more effective than receiving the same information from folks who didn't share that experience. And there's good research evidence that that difference makes a meaningful difference in students' retention, their grades, so forth. So that's the kind of information that we would like to be able to feed into the larger TRIO effort. So we think that that small investment of $20 million in the context of the overall program is worth it to try and leverage good information about what works.
As you know, TRIO has a very active support group and advocacy group of many, many years standing. Do you know, are they supportive of what you're trying to do? Have they taken a position on this one way or the other?
I'll have our team follow up. I don't know that there's been a collective response necessarily from all the folks who are interested in TRIO. I will say there's been a lot of enthusiasm for our work on the education, innovation, and research efforts.
Okay, well, good. Well, we would appreciate any information you found if you do have a chance to do that follow-up. Mr. Secretary, in the fiscal year 2016 omnibus, we provided an increase of $20 million for the Native Youth Community Projects to support culturally relevant strategies to improve college and career readiness amongst Native American children. I'm pleased to see that you've proposed an additional increase again this year. Can you please give us an update on what you think has been accomplished so far in this program and describe how you propose to build on that with your 2017 request for an additional $31 million?
Yeah, we're certainly early in the process, but what we've seen is that by bringing together tribal communities to think about what would it take to have culturally responsive instruction in the schools, leverage students' native language, to try and ensure that students are on a path for college and career readiness, that we can see real educational improvement. And so we think this is an important investment. If you look at our high school graduation rates as a country, almost every group has seen improvement over the last few years, except in our most recent data, Native American students did not make improvements. And I think that's an illustration that we have more work to do to ensure that Native youth understand that college is possible for them, that jobs are possible for them. When we've met with Native youth and Native educators who are working on the Native youth community projects, they talk about the hopelessness that you often see in many communities. I know you're familiar with this from your state. And that hopelessness then translates into students not being motivated in school, not sticking through to graduation, not going on to college. So we think this strategy of really focusing on bringing communities together around college and career readiness can be high leverage. That's why we propose a significant increase.
Well, I just want to commend you for doing so and appreciate your focus, the department's focus, certainly the administration's focus on this population in this area. You're to be commended for it. With that, I'd like to go to my good friend, the ranking member for the full committee, for whatever questions she'd care to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you well know, Mr. Secretary, a number of students in New York have opted out of taking state assessments. Under both No Child Left Behind and the ESSA, the department has the ability to penalize school districts by reducing Title I funding if less than 95% of students take state assessment exams. Mr. Secretary, I represent a number of school districts that did not meet the 95% threshold despite the participation of the overwhelming majority of students. I'm very concerned that if the department does not work with local school district students, the majority of which sat for state assessments, will be punished as a result of a small number of students who opted out of the test. Will the department provide flexibility to school districts who are putting forth a good faith effort on participation rates to ensure that needy students are not punished?
The key is we think it's hugely important for families and educators to have good information about students' progress each year. That's the goal of the assessment system as required in the Every Student Succeeds Act. We've communicated to states their continuing responsibility to ensure that all students participate in the assessment system. And our experience has been that states are working diligently to try to talk with their districts, with parents, with communities about the importance of the assessments and the role that they play. And we expect states to move forward with that. There were a small number of states that did not meet the participation requirement last year. We've communicated with those states what their responsibilities are, and our impression is that states are working diligently to address it. So I'm optimistic that states will ensure that the districts get to a better place where we've seen these issues.
I hope I'm optimistic, and the issue is of critical importance, as you know, and I'm going to continue to monitor the department's role to ensure it carries out the goals of the new ESSA, but it's important that we provide more flexibility to those at the local level. A question about Ready to Learn and open educational resources. You're aware, I'm sure, this past fall, the department published a notice of proposed rulemaking related to open educational resources. The proposed rule is far-reaching, would require that any intellectual property produced, even in part with department grant funding, be openly licensed and available for use, modification, and dissemination free of charge by other companies, organizations, and individual members of the public. After speaking to many people, I have concerns about the negative impact this proposed rule would have on public media, which already distributes the content created in part through the department's Ready to Learn grant to nearly every household in the country for free. How does the department plan to address the challenges this proposed rule would pose to essential partners like public media?
So the context for this proposed rule is that open educational resources can be a lever for equity. One of the things that we know is a challenge across communities is access to high-quality curricular resources. And so we see in some of, particularly our high-needs urban and rural communities, a lack of access to those materials, translating into less opportunity for students. So the premise of the open educational resources effort is that where the federal government invests funds in the creation of materials, we ought to make those materials broadly available to advance equity. We're in the stage of reviewing public comment on the proposed rule, and we'll try to address any of the concerns that we've received from grantees. As a general matter, I think the reception on the open educational resource rule has been very positive because of the belief that it will be a lever for equity. But certainly appreciate the important role that public television, public media play in American culture, and want to make sure that we're sensitive to those issues. And certainly our staff can follow up with yours further.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll go next to Mr. Fattah for whatever questions he cares to pose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's start with Gear Up. The department is, and rightfully so, focused on evidence and data. Why don't you share with the committee what the evidence and data is relative to Gear Up?
Yeah, the overall results of the Gear Up program have been very positive, and I think you made the point in your opening remarks that the TRIO programs and the Gear Up programs have both had a positive effect on, particularly on graduation rates, but also students' readiness to transition to college. And that's why we think they're important programs. That's why the President preserves the funding increases from last year in our proposed budget.
And how many children do we have in Gear Up programs a day?
500,000
500,000.
students are served by Gear Up.
And they're spread through how many states?
I think it's 39 states. Yeah.
And with the increase that the committee provided of some $20 million, is there going to be a new competition?
We do expect to have a grant competition to add additional programs.
Okay, now I've worked with Senator Coons on a proposal that the department, I think, piloted last year or the year before to take a few thousand students and to seed small college savings accounts. It's called the American Dream accounts effort, and to marry it up with online higher ed counseling. It's just based on some evidence. It's an empirical analysis that shows that poor children, even when they have as small as $100 in a savings account, focus at them going to college, their grades improve, the expectations improve for them by their teachers. And I know we're in the early stages of this, but does the department have any, this pilot program I think now has some 10,000 kids in it, through Gear Up. Do we have any information about that?
I don't at the moment, but I'll have our staff follow up with you on that.
Okay. All right. And the loan repayment efforts that were embedded in the Affordable Care Act, this opportunity for loans to be forgiven for public service. Can we shift gears and you talk to us a little bit about where that is and how many young people are taking advantage of it?
Yeah, I don't know the precise number of students who are taking advantage. We do worry that in these public service forgiveness programs that there's inadequate kind of public knowledge and public awareness on the part of students. So one of our goals is to try to increase student awareness of the programs, particularly on teaching. We see that there are a number of teaching loan forgiveness programs, but the participation rate is not as high as we would want. This budget proposes actually consolidating those teacher loan forgiveness programs to create a streamlined program that would provide $10,000 of loan forgiveness, $25,000 if students have attended what their state rates as a highly effective teacher preparation program. So this is a place where we're focused on trying to make sure that students are as aware as possible of their options.
All right, this is broader than just the teachers. In what we did was we said there were two approaches. One was you could cap your total repayment or your amount you had to repay to 10% of your income over your lifetime, right? And secondly, there was an opportunity to have your student loan forgiven to the degree that you decided to go into public service as a police officer or a teacher or some other public service needed profession. And since and so I was wondering whether the department has some sense of whether this is getting out there, whether young people are utilizing it, and to what benefit.
You had a tremendous push in the income-driven repayment programs to let people know about the availability of them, and many more students are signing up for them. It's still a little early for students to have achieved the necessary number of years in public service to get a loan forgiven, so we don't have any hard data really that's worth much on how many people are getting loan forgiveness, but it looks like it's a very popular option. It helps people deal with high student debt if they've got it. We have a number of proposals in the budget this year to reform some of the proposals because it's possible that the public service forgiveness is giving people an inappropriate sort of signal or an incentive to borrow more than they need, particularly in graduate school. Undergraduates, not so much, but a lot of people exceed the $57,500 cap that's available for undergraduate borrowing when they go to graduate school. So we wanted to make sure that folks knew that they shouldn't be borrowing just because they could and potentially get the loan forgiven after 10 years.
Right, so, and I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman. I think we need to do a lot more to let young people know about what's available. Maybe we'll do it after the reform. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll next go to my good friend gentleman from Tennessee for whatever questions he cares to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, Mr. Skelly, and Mr. Secretary. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Secretary King, I would like to ask you a series of questions, sir, regarding student loan servicing. The contracts that the department has in place with the 10 national nonprofit and for-profit servicers specify that servicer performance will be measured semi-annually in the areas of customer satisfaction and default prevention. And these results will determine future loan volume allocations twice a year. I have a two-part question. The first question, sir, is what rationale and under what authority is the department using to unilaterally reduce the allocation window from September to July? And then secondly, doesn't this recent announcement directly contradict the language included in your servicing contracts, which require the department to allocate loan volume to student loan services based on performance and capacity through fiscal year 2016?
Thanks for the question. So certainly our goal in servicing is to make sure that we serve borrowers' interests well and serve taxpayers' interests well. The 2016 budget required us to reallocate loans for this year using existing metrics of performance between the not-for-profits and the TIVAs. That process took place. We have done a loan reallocation. But one of the challenges is that our existing metrics actually do not make a apples-to-apples fair comparison between the different servicers. And so our next step is to develop metrics that more accurately assess performance across the different types of servicers based on the mix of loans that they have. What mix of loans that you have affects many of these performance indicators. And so we are gathering input now from the not-for-profits and the TIVAs on those metrics, and we'll develop new metrics in advance of the next academic year. So by July, we expect to have new metrics in place for the allocation going forward, consistent with what is required in the 2016 budget.
Okay, sir. As a follow-up to that, last week, Federal Student Aid announced it was creating new performance metrics for loan allocation, quote, because of the significant variation in the composition of loan portfolios between student loan servicers. Several questions. What variation is FSA talking about, sir?
Yeah, so the key issue is the nature of the loans that are given. So, for example, if you're a servicer and you have loans of currently enrolled students who are not yet in the process of paying back their loans, that is very different from having loans from students who may be high-risk borrowers. And so we want to make sure that our methodology accounts for variations in the loan portfolio.
Okay. Why is the department creating new performance metrics when it just completed such a process in 2014? And as a follow-up to that, what new performance metrics is the department considering using going forward?
So the key is we want to make sure that as we do the next round of loan distribution beginning this summer, that we use the best metrics to compare performance, again, so that we're protecting the interests of both borrowers and taxpayers. We haven't determined what those new metrics will be. That's the process we're in now, and we're gathering feedback, again, from both the not-for-profits and the TIVAs on what those metrics should look like.
Is the department taking such steps to circumvent the language included in the Consolidation Appropriations Act? And wouldn't it be more appropriate to incorporate such new metrics as part of the upcoming recompete instead of changing the rules of the game midstream, sir?
Well, the challenge is that the 2016 budget changed the methodology for this year from prior years. In changing that methodology, we were limited by existing metrics that, again, don't necessarily adequately measure the differences in the loan portfolios. So we want to make sure before the significant tranche of new loans takes place this summer, August, September, some of the highest volume months, that we have the best possible metrics, focus again on performance for students and taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. And we'll next go to my good friend, the gentlelady from Alabama, for whatever questions she cares to offer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And congratulations, Secretary, on your confirmation, and look forward to getting to know you and hopefully being able to work together. As you know, the ESSA includes provisions that specifically prohibit you and your staff at the Department of Education from using funding grants or special policy waivers to influence or coerce states into adopting certain standards or curricula. And as you may or may not know, I proposed that language when I was on the authorizing committee in a standalone bill, and I worked for 3 years to get it in the final bill. It was born out of frustration over department officials habitually exercising undue and inappropriate influence over state education decisions throughout the former secretary's tenure. So we both know old habits die hard, and it's not hard to imagine bureaucrats thinking, hey, we know better than Congress. We're going to keep doing what we think is best, despite the specific language that is included in the current bill. So, Mr. Secretary, how can you assure this committee and the Congress that your department will comply with this very, very important provision of the law? And how will you change the culture at the department to prevent your team from falling into the same bad habits of telling the states what to do?
Two important elements of the Every Student Succeeds Act that have important implications for your question. One is the requirement that states have standards in place that ensure students are ready for success after they leave high school. We know that in many states across the country, I know you're familiar with this, we see students arriving on college campuses only to be told that they need to take remedial courses, which really is a euphemism for high school classes, because they don't have the academic skills they need for success in college. We hear all the time, I'm sure you hear this from your constituents, from employers who say they are struggling to find employees with the skills that are necessary. So ESSA importantly requires states to have standards that reflect college and career readiness. We think that's critical. ESSA also requires that standards are the province of states, for states to determine. We agree with that, that the department's position throughout the last 7 years and today is that standards should be determined by states, but that those standards should be high and should point towards college and career readiness. And I think ESSA strikes the right balance, and we intend to adhere to exactly what ESSA requires, that the standards are the province of the states.
Well, thank you for your response. I really appreciate hearing your commitment to that very important provision of the law. I know, though, a lot depends on rulemaking, and we need to ensure that those rules comply with the intent of Congress. And so as a member who fought very hard for these provisions in the law, let me state very clearly again that the intention is to stop federal coercion in education decisions, not just on Common Core. I know that that's what the debate seems to center around a lot. So it's not just about Common Core, but it's the next policy that that the department wants to push in the next year or 5 years or whenever. So I do appreciate your commitment to that. Let's see how much we can fit in a minute and 22 seconds. There is the administration's request for $1.2 billion for career and technical education. It's an increase of $77 million over FY 2016 appropriation. The request would provide $1.1 billion for state formula programs and $75 million to fund a grant competition for American Technical Training Fund. So rather than funding a large competition grants, it seems to me that the funds would be better used to support state formula grants, which would ensure more students are able to benefit from the CTE experience. So many of my constituents benefit from this. So can you just address the competitive grant versus?
Sure. So the goal of the American Technical Training Fund is really to incentivize partnerships between higher ed institutions, school districts, and employers to provide high quality, and workforce investment boards to provide high quality career and technical education experiences. We think that kind of cross-sector partnership is critical to driving quality programs. I was just at Alabama A&M last week, meeting with them on their STEM programs that they've developed in partnership with NASA. And you can see the strength of, as well as Lockheed Martin, the strength of those employer higher ed institution collaborations. And so our goal in this program is to foster that alongside the kinds of career and technical education programs that are supported by the traditional Perkins program.
And we'll continue this. My time has expired, so I'll yield back, but we'll continue this if there's another round. Thanks.
All right, thank the gentlelady. We next go to my good friend, gentlelady from California, Ms. Roybal Allard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Secretary King. Each year, children and families are shortchanged when the federal government does not meet its full commitment to special education under the Individuals with Disability Education Act. While school districts across the country have a serious need for additional resources, IDEA is consistently funded well below the 40% federal cost share that was promised under the bill's authorization. Once again, I am disappointed that the President's budget request only funds the federal share of education for students with disabilities at 16%. Given the tremendous need that exists for students with disabilities, can you please explain why the President's budget freezes funding for IDEA state grants while requesting $465 million for programs that are unauthorized and unproven?
So let me first say that I share your commitment to the important role of IDEA in supporting the success of our students with disabilities, as does the President. The budget maintains the $415 million increase from 2016 for IDEA. The budget also includes an increase for IDEA preschool and IDEA infants and families. So there are IDEA increases. One of the constraints in the budget process for us was to try to balance advancing priorities with maintaining the caps that were agreed upon in last year's budget agreement. And the IDEA budget reflects that we, again, maintain last year's increase and then have an increase for preschool and infants and families.
Well, the fact is, though, that the President's budget does not reflect a dedicated effort to meet our federal obligation to special education, and instead has requested robust funding for new and unproven programs, and that is a big concern. As you know, the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Block Grant, Title 4A, under the Every Student Succeeds Act, consolidates into a single block grant several programs that protect the health and safety of students, promote well-rounded enrichment opportunities, and invest in education technology. Again, I am deeply concerned that the President's budget proposes to fund this program at barely $500 million, which is less than 1/3 of its authorized funding level. If the President's budget request is implemented, school districts will be seriously compromised in their ability to invest in K-12 services ranging from advanced placement courses to high-quality digital learning. Competitive grant structures risk leaving many under-resourced school districts without any federal support. Can you please justify your less than adequate funding request for Title IV-A and your recommendation to turn the program into a competitive grant?
So Title IV, we think the new version of Title IV under the Every Student Succeeds Act has a number of very important purposes. As you described, well-rounded education, supporting school counseling, supporting education technology, supporting districts that want to offer advanced placement courses. The pre-existing programs that are folded into Title IV were funded in the 2016 budget at $278 million. We propose Title IV funding at $500 million. That's a $222 million increase over last year's spending. It is less than the authorized level. Again, we were trying to, in our budget, both advance the President's priorities and stay within the budget caps that were agreed to in last year's budget agreement. But we're certainly open to working with you and others on the committee as we move forward in the budget process, because we do believe that Title IV has very important elements. The proposal around a competitive awarding of the grant is to give states the option to award the grant competitively, because we worry that without that competitive element, you could have a distribution in a state through a formula methodology that results in school districts receiving $10,000, which may not be enough to actually offer a meaningful program in school counseling or arts education or advanced placement courses. So we propose giving states the option to make the grant competitive within the state around state priorities with a $50,000 floor so that we can ensure that the Title IV grant has a meaningful impact for students.
Well, and I recognize, that argument, but on the flip side of that, it also leaves a lot of very needy school districts and areas that don't have the resources, with the inability to compete and be competitive for those grants. So that's the flip side of what you're saying. And unfortunately, this funding continues the cycle of inadequately funding necessary supports for a lot of students and leaves out a lot of schools, particularly those that I represent. And I see, Mr. Chairman, that my time is just about up, so I'll wait till the next round.
I've enjoyed the questions. They're great questions. If I can, I'll go to my good friend, the gentleman from Arkansas, who's also the vice chairman of the committee, Mr. Womack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, Mr. Skelly, welcome once again. Congratulations, Mr. King, on your appointment and your confirmation. My colleague from Alabama opened the door on career and technical education, and I'd like to go back into that subject for just a minute and save her questions later for another topic if she'd like to do that. First of all, I'm a huge believer in career and technical education, and it is my opinion, only my opinion, that our country has maybe even duped an entire generation of young people to believe that the only real road to success is a four-year degree, going to your local college or university and getting that four-year liberal arts degree, perhaps, and we left a lot of opportunities for these kids begging. In fact, when I travel my district, one of the first things I hear from my job creators is the skills gap, and the fact that we had an opportunity to put a lot of kids in that pipeline and just did not. And a lot of these skills are just simply not able to match the job requirements. So I want to go back to the fact that that there is level funding, the $1.2 billion in level funding, and the $75 million request for a new competitive grant program, and get your thoughts as to why we would be opening up a new unproven program of $75 million when we're not able to meet the demands across the rest of the spectrum. So can you just kind of articulate on that, and then I have one other question.
Yeah, again, I think our goal there is to try to create a best practice model through what is a relatively small, targeted, competitive grant that would incentivize strong partnerships We also would like to see Perkins Career Technical Education Act reauthorization in a way that advances this notion of partnership. In my experience in New York, one of the things that we worked on was creating partnership high schools, where high schools were partnered with community colleges and employers. Students would graduate with high school diploma, associate's degree first in line for a job at those employers. We've created those all across the state, and what we found was there was huge demand, just as you're describing, from employers across industries, from advanced manufacturing to pharmaceuticals to the tech industry. We think that notion of partnership should drive reauthorization of the Perkins CTE program. President also has a Next Generation High Schools proposal, which would be about getting high schools to think differently about their design so that they can do exactly what you're describing, help students see that it's not a question of necessarily even college versus career, but it's the idea that post-secondary training is essential, and that can lead you on a career path that might bring you back to school multiple times to hone your skills, but that career could be the hook that gets a high school student interested and focused on their future.
On another subject, in our fiscal environment, we've been taught that data and evidence-based approaches are critical to improving our education system, and we're all forced to do more with less. Everybody gets that. And I'm a big supporter of state and local control when it comes to education. But I think most of us can agree that there are some areas where the federal government can play an effective role, and I believe one of those areas is research and creating transparency through data. And I'm glad to see the Department of Education withdrawing its troubling plan to rate colleges. It demonstrates a fine line between providing students and institutions with more data and trying to generate a one-size-fits-all system for evaluation. I would argue that consumers are probably more suited to judge whether an institution is right for them based on their unique circumstances rather than a bureaucracy up here. I mention this because I noticed in your budget proposal that you request funding for an initiative launched this year, InformED, that will make the department's data and research across the education spectrum more available and actionable for internal users and for the public. So can you explain in greater detail in the last minute that I have behind this new initiative and tell me your plans for making this data actionable?
Yes. So as you say, the data can inform decision-making at the local level, state level, and at the federal level. What we've seen with the college scorecard, the approach that we took was to really make transparent the department's data and also make that data available to nonprofits and others who wanted to use it while protecting privacy, use it to inform consumers. What we've seen, for example, is a program called Pell Abacus that helps students see within a minute how they might calculate what their actual cost would be at a given college. I was at a high school recently with students, watching the students as they discovered that a college they thought would never be accessible to them based on their financial aid package actually could be within reach. And that's a powerful way that data can be leveraged. The Inform Ed proposal seeks to do that kind of work across the department. The bulk of the funding, I think $13 of the $15 million, is really for states to improve their data quality, data management, so that we can pull up that data to the federal level in a way that helps inform states, districts, and ultimately students and families.
Thank you. Oh, the gentleman from Maryland is gone. Okay. Well, I'll move on and recognize myself then. Mr. Secretary, several education advocacy organizations are concerned about the department's funding request for Title I grants to local education agencies because they believe it will result in a reduction in Title I allocation in many schools. In a sense, it's sort of building on the point that my good friend from California made. Are these groups correct in that? And if so, why does the request shortchange districts and instead invest in some unauthorized competitive grant programs as opposed to something sort of tried and true like Title I?
Yeah, so let me give some context to how we approached the Title I allocation. So our Title I proposal is actually $350 million above the authorized level because we do think Title I is very important in getting resources to our highest need districts. What we propose is that $350 million be divided between formula dollars and school improvement dollars that would focus on the schools that are struggling. So for districts that have significant numbers of struggling schools, they will likely see level funding or an increase because of that school improvement focus. But because states will determine which schools are the schools most in need of improvement, and states are the ones who develop those lists, it's not possible for us to project exactly what the implications will be for any given district. It will depend on how many schools they have that are deeply struggling.
Well, not to push this point too hard, but as I'm sure you're aware, there's a great deal of unease and uncertainty because of that, there isn't a predictability there, and there's concern that some of these schools will literally just fall through the cracks, or we'll have something done at a state level that really doesn't direct the money to where it's needed. So I think that's something that a lot of folks have considerable concern about. In terms of the Every Child Succeeds Act represented a significant shift of control over K-12 education policies and programs from federal to the state level. How does your budget request address this shift and assist in building capacity in states to take over these new responsibilities? And wouldn't a larger investment in block and formula grants as opposed to the new competitive grant programs included in your budget be a better way to help states to succeed under the new law?
We certainly think that the increases that we saw in Title I last year, the significant increase we propose in the Title IV programs, will be important to Every Student Succeeds Act implementation. We also are in the process now. We've gathered, we've held public hearings. We've gathered significant public comment on implementation. We've begun negotiated rulemaking in 2 areas based on input from states and districts, as well as civil rights organizations and community organizations. And we intend to implement the law in a very collaborative way, gathering feedback throughout as we develop guidance and regulations. Driving our work on guidance and technical assistance will be what we hear from districts and states about what they need. We do think some of the specific competitive grant requests here advance key priorities within the Every Student Succeeds Act. But it's worth saying that 94% of what we propose is directed to formula dollars. The vast majority of what's funded in the President's budget is through formula. But we do think there are places where competitive grants can highlight or incentivize particular practices that will help drive educational improvement.
Well, and this is hardly your fault, but there is some concern, certainly I have concerns, that because Congress was late in getting this legislation to you, frankly, the President, and with all due respect, he will only be there for a certain period of time, a few months, really. And I'm very skeptical about new initiatives when the people that are implementing them aren't going to have the time frame to actually be there. So, you have any concern of that yourself?
Well, we think that the proposals that we've made really build on the last 7 years of work, build on the bipartisan agreement in the Every Student Succeeds Act, and point towards important priorities that are shared bipartisan priorities. So we propose, for example, an increase in the preschool development grant program because I think there's strong bipartisan consensus not only in Washington but in state capitals around the importance of investing in early learning. We propose a program around computer science because I think everyone understands, again, in a bipartisan way, that computer science is a part of our future competitiveness and that we ought to be helping districts and states think about how to support their students in achieving around computer science so that they're ready to compete for the 21st century jobs that will rely on computer science.
Great. Good. I'll go ahead and get from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fattah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me, I want to revisit this issue around equity. And I know my colleague from Alabama talked about standards, and you said that, standards should be left to the states. I want to return us to a different president, President Nixon. And he said this issue about local control is it's an injustice wrapped up in a virtue, right? That in the Nixon School Finance Commission, in its summary, it said that as long as we have a property-based funded school system, poor children in our country are going to disproportionately fail. And the reason for it is that if you're funding schools on a property tax, then poor communities are going to be able to they're going to have a higher millage, but they're going to put less money behind each child. So we have in the classrooms of the poorest children in our country today, this has been true since Nixon was president, they have in the main teachers who in the major subjects haven't majored or minored in the subjects that they're teaching, math, science, English, because these school districts can't afford to compete with their wealthier suburban districts for, the teachers who are certified in math, right? They have, in many of our states, double the classroom size. They have textbooks that haven't been printed in these children's lifetime. So when we stand here and we talk about, well, it's a local matter, it is, and it's an unfortunate local matter, right? That is to say that our states, the politics of the state house is that the poor communities, in the rural communities in Appalachia and big cities, poor communities, get the short end of how these things get worked out. And even when states set up important standards, like teacher qualifications, they then grant waivers. Everywhere you can find a predominant group of poor children, the state waives the requirement, right? Rather than create a impulse to actually get qualified people in the classroom. So when Education Trust did the study in California, and they found 57,000 teachers who are not major or minor in the subjects they're teaching, right? Now, I'm not blaming the teachers. These are good people. But when at my alma mater, Overbrook High School, a young lady shows up. She's got a degree in art history. Principal says, look, I don't have anybody teaching geometry. You got to go teach geometry. At the end of the school year, that young lady quit. Those kids did not learn a lot of geometry. And down the street at the middle school at Sulzberger, 14 substitute teachers teaching math on the course of 1 year. It's impossible for these children under those circumstances. So I don't want us to pretend like, well, if we leave it to state governments, poor children will get a quality education. That has never been the history in our country. And if the federal government doesn't insist to some degree or another as a referee that we have to have some form of equity, it's not going to happen in any of our states. So I just want the record to be clear on this matter, that yes, we have a system of local control of schools. It has never served poor children, and particularly children who come from intergenerational poverty well. And it won't today, it won't tomorrow, and we at some point, if we want to get more of our children headed in the right direction, we're going to have to do something more about it.
I certainly share that view. That I served on the Equity and Excellence Commission that you helped to create, and that commission tried to make the point that the fate of all of our children is bound up together. And so as we think about local control, we have to remember that all of our children are diminished if there are other children who do not have access to opportunity. And we think the implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act requires a strong civil rights role for the department in ensuring equity. It's important that the law requires equitable access to effective teachers, that the law requires transparency around per-pupil spending and access to advanced coursework and access to early learning, and we expect to fulfill that civil rights responsibility.
And I think it can be done. I think we have a basketball team in Philadelphia. They're not doing all that well these days, not as well as the one in Oklahoma. But the court is the same size. The rim is at the same level, right? The ball has got the same. I mean, we can create some level of equity so that children have an opportunity to succeed. The Sixers have an opportunity to play well. They just haven't gotten there yet. All right? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
They just don't have Kevin Durant. With that, we'll go to my good friend from Maryland for whatever questions he cares to pose to the Secretary.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. Welcome. I'm just going to concentrate on one program. It's the one I've asked the person who sat in that chair for the past 3 years about, which is the Opportunity Scholarship Program. The opportunity for low-income individuals to get a chance. So the first thing I'm going to say, I'm glad that again on page 9 of your of the budget book, you said there's this effort to promote greater use of evidence and data. Actually, on page 6 of your testimony, it says, finally, we extend our commitment to improving student outcome by increasing funding for program based on evidence of success. So I'm going to ask you, does the Department of Education intend on increasing funding for the OSP? because I think the evidence is pretty good that it's successful. I mean, a graduation rate of 90% as opposed to 64% in a regular D.C. public school is pretty good evidence of success. I mean, a 26% increase in graduation rate. So is the department, in accordance with your testimony about using evidence and data to increase programs that work, are you in favor of expanding the Opportunity Scholarship Program?
We're committed to implementing the program as required by law, but don't believe that vouchers are a scalable solution to the challenges we face as a
So you are unwilling to expand the program?
Again,
Now,
we'll implement.
Let me
the program in
refer to what
accordance
the
with
Washington
law.
Post. You know, the Washington Post is editorialized about this, and has called the claims made by opponents of expansion specious claims. And just in case you don't know the meaning of specious, it is superficially plausible but wrong. So, do you believe the data is just wrong?
Don't believe that vouchers can be the answer to the challenges we face at scale.
Well, let me follow up with that. Thousands of families, again, in that Washington Post editorial, I'm going to take them at their word that there are thousands of families on the waiting list. Has the department over the past few years actually studied what happens to the children who don't get into the program versus the ones who, because we know the ones who do graduate at a 90% rate. What happens to the children who don't get into the program? What's their graduation rate?
There was an IES comparative study, I believe in 2010, that showed, I think, a 12 percentage point difference in graduation rates
and that would
between the participating students
and that would be an improvement in the
students.
graduation rates. That's right.
That's right. That's right.
So let's say there were 1,000 children on the waiting list in a year. That'd be 120 children who actually graduate that year if they had been given an opportunity scholarship. Do you believe that data? And that's old data.
I think the IES study was
Okay,
well designed, and there is an ongoing evaluation. I would note that the District of Columbia district schools have also seen a significant improvement in graduation rates over that time period, and there are very strong charter schools in the District of Columbia. Not all, but some of the charter schools are performing quite well.
The district's improvement rate was from 56% to 64%. So of that 100 students, you've helped 8 of them, whereas the data shows that you would help 12 with the OSP. So I'm going to go to your testimony. You said, we extend our commitment to improving student outcomes by increasing funding for programs based on evidence of success. There's evidence of success, and what you're telling me is you don't want to increase funding. So is it just some programs that have evidence of success? Is it we pick the science and we pick the studies, and if it's politically untenable to perhaps go against some vested interest, we're not going to support it? So anyway, I want to ask you, what about the carryover dollars? I mean, there actually are dollars out there that could expand this program. And my understanding is that the carryover dollars are not being allowed to be spent now by Serving Our Children, which is now the administrator of the program. Is that the position of your department, that carryover dollars will not allowed to be spent on expanding this program, which is proven successful to help needy, low-income children actually graduate? Is that the position of the department?
Just to be clear, so the evidence of success is an important factor. Another important factor is scalability, and we believe that that public school choice, the district and charter options in D.C. are the more scalable option. That said, the carryover funds are dedicated to ensuring that the students who are currently enrolled in the program will have the opportunity to continue. We don't want to see an eventuality where students have begun in a school and there isn't funding available and they're forced to change schools. And so we've set aside the carryover funds to ensure that the currently enrolled students are able to continue.
I'll yield back, and my time's running out, and I'll just continue in the second round. Thank you.
We'll go next to the gentlelady from Alabama.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to, before I move on to a different issue, and I appreciate the gentleman from Arkansas talking about the career and technical education, I do want to tie a bow around the local control box, though. The language is very explicit in ESSA that the federal government, the U.S. Department of Education, cannot use federal funds to coerce states into adopting certain curricula and standards. And we've agreed on that, and you've committed to upholding that portion of the law. But I want to also make sure, take it one step further, that you have no intention, and under your leadership, the people that work for the U.S. Department of Education will not use, per the law, grant programs or waiver programs to then coerce states into adopting certain curriculum. And I just want to make sure that our understanding is the same, that the law is explicit in its language that you cannot do that.
Yeah, so as we discussed, standards and curriculum are the province of state and local decisions. I will again say that we have an important civil rights function. And so, for example, if in a given district, English language learners were not allowed to access programs on an equitable basis, the department would have a civil rights responsibility.
But you can't use waiver programs or grant programs to require the state of Alabama to adopt certain standards or curriculum.
That's right. The Every Student Succeeds Act requires them to adopt standards.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're clear when it comes to curriculum and standards that the U.S. Department of Education cannot use waiver programs, or because what ends up happening and what we've seen happen is that because of what happened in the past under the old law is that states end up spending precious dollars to comply with waiver programs to adopt, because the federal government in the past has been able to coerce states that could otherwise be implemented used in the classroom. And now, with parents and teachers and administrators on the local level in the driver's seat, those dollars can be best spent on our children, and the states can make the decisions about those curriculum and standards. But I wanted to specifically address the waiver and grant programs, and I think we're clearly on the same page. I want to move to the administration's proposal for the on-track Pell bonus, which would give $300 to Pell Grant recipients who enroll in 15 credit hours per semester in an academic year. The objective is to encourage students to complete 60 credit hours within a 2-year period and 120 credit hours in 4 years. So where the goal behind this program is commendable, I'm concerned that this Pell bonus might encourage students to enroll in more credits than they can handle just to receive the $300 bonus. Furthermore, I don't see how this program helps non-traditional students who are unable to take 15 credit hours because they've got a work schedule and or family that they take care of. So this idea seems to promote quantity over quality. And like many things that we do around here, could lead to some very negative unintended consequences. So what can you tell this committee in a minute and 30 seconds that the on-track Pell bonus would not lead to abuse or diminish learning outcomes for students who feel pressured because of this incentive to take on more than they can handle just to get that $300 bonus?
So the goal of the President's proposals around college completion address the challenge that we see. Many of the students who are defaulting on their debt are students who start but don't finish. So they don't have a degree, but they do have debt, and they can't pay it back because they can't get a good job because they don't have the degree. So there's a set of programs that would work together. There's good evidence that incentives to take 15 or more credits make a difference for college completion. A number of efforts around the country, including the University of Hawaii, has very strong evidence around a focus on 15 credits. We also propose Summer Pell, allowing students to access Pell dollars during the summer, which for the non-traditional student can be essential because that's an opportunity for them to continue their coursework over the summer and stay on track to on-time graduation. We also propose an institutional bonus that would incentivize colleges and universities to focus on completion support. I was just at Georgia State last week, same day I went to Alabama A&M. They've increased their graduation rate by 22 points over the last decade while nearly doubling the number of students who are Pell eligible through a focus on supporting students through to completion. Academic advising, support services, good counseling on which courses to take and how to fulfill their credit requirements for their major. And so we think this package of efforts will help us address our completion challenges.
So my time has expired, but I would just say that I have concerns that this would not only lead to individuals taking on more than they can handle, but also there is an opportunity here for abuse to take place as well as diminish learning outcomes. So as a committee, I hope that we will continue to look into this. I yield back.
Thank you. Just for informational purposes, some of us have had an opportunity to have 2 rounds, some of us has not. So we're going to move to those people that have only had an opportunity to have 1 round. We'll start, if we may, with our distinguished ranking member of the full committee.
Well, thank you very much. And because this issue is so important, although there are about 3 or 4 hearings going on at the same time, I did want to come back. Because this student loan debt, which has reached $1.2 trillion nationwide for 40 million borrowers, making the average student loan burden $29,000 upon graduation, is a major challenge for all of us. And I want to say at the outset, I think it was 3 years ago, or 3 cycles ago, that we took away the 3rd cycle of Pell Grants. And when you visit the community colleges, which I do all the time, these kids are now working 3, 4, 5, 6 jobs. And if they could get another cycle, continuing the 3, 4, 5, 6 jobs, they could get out there and work with a degree. So I want to emphasize this again, ask our distinguished chairman, maybe we can do something through the appropriations process. So that's shaking your heads. I know you agree. In 1980, Pell Grants covered 77% of the cost of a 4-year college program. Due to the rising cost of college in the 2015-2016 school year, Pell Grants covered just 29% of the cost, forcing students to take on additional debt, which we've been talking about. And this is why I was very pleased that the budget request includes the maximum value for Pell Grants. And I'm glad in the request you are asking for the 3rd semester, or maybe trimester of Pell eligibility, and provide a bonus to students who take additional credits, which together would help students graduate more quickly with less debt and enter the workforce faster. To me, it's a win-win. 3rd cycle, let them get that education, let them get out. I'm concerned that the current level of student loan debt is absolutely unsustainable. In addition to your Pell expansion proposals, I'd like to know what the department is doing to reduce student loan debt and make our higher education more affordable. And as Congress is preparing to debate a Higher Education Act reauthorization, what more can we do to ease the financial burden on those trying to pay for college or a vocational training? Thank you.
It's a very important question. You know, one of the things that we are seeing that's promising, as we discussed earlier, was students enrolling in the income-based repayment program. We propose streamlining that income-based repayment process so that students can enroll in programs that cap their student debt payments at 10% of their income. We'd like to see rapid expansion of that effort, and we're reaching out to students so that they are aware of that possibility. That will be helpful. There are a number of proposals, including in the red proposals around students' ability to refinance, that we think would be potentially helpful to students if done in the right way. The President has also proposed America's College Promise, as you know, which would guarantee for hardworking students that they would be able to go to 2 years of community college for free, or the first 2 years at a historically black college or university or a minority-serving institution. We think that can be a powerful lever. In the structure of that program, we also require states to meet the national average commitment, and the amount that the state gets is tied up with how close they are to that national average commitment. The intention there is to incentivize states to maintain or increase their investment in public higher education. And as you know, one of the reasons why we've seen the shifting of costs to students is in many states around the country, we've seen a retreat from investment in public higher education.
Thank you, and I hope to continue the discussion, but with my 1 minute, I just wanted to get another issue on the record because I think it's so important. Title VI and anti-Semitism. The International Education and Foreign Language Studies program within Title VI advances national security, foreign policy, and economic interests. I really have very great concern about reports that some recipients of these funds are disproportionately focused on or biased against Israel, and in 2014, the department revised many Title VI program performance measures by focusing on quantitative metrics. How did these reviews affect the International and Foreign Language Studies program? What step is the department taking to ensure that federal investments are not perpetuating an anti-Israel bias? And I just want to say, the reports I've been getting, there's a bipartisan caucus, as you probably know and are a part of, on anti-Semitism and what's going on the college campuses. I have personally witnessed it. It is truly outrageous. So, Mr. Chairman, if you would give the distinguished secretary a minute just to tell us what you can do, what we can do, and I know many of us are working together to address this.
Yes. So in terms of the international programs, international language and education programs, we can follow up with more detail on those programs. I would say important to us is that in all of those programs, we are supporting the celebration of diversity and pluralism in how we approach those. One of the first things I did on becoming secretary was also the last thing Secretary Duncan did was signed a joint letter that went to all of our universities and school districts around issues of tolerance and religious tolerance and celebrating diversity and protecting students from bullying and harassment based on religion or other issues of prejudice. So we're very committed to setting the right tone around that, and certainly our Office of Civil Rights responds to complaints that we get, whether it's from higher ed institutions or districts, around intolerance, prejudice, harassment that occur on campuses. We had a convening last year with higher ed institutions focused on campus climate and issues of racial and ethnic harassment. So eager to continue to work with you and others on the committee on this issue.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reports I've gotten are really outrageous. New York City public colleges, UCLA, we saw those reports, and I think this is an issue that we should pursue together as we are, Democrats and Republicans, but seeing what we can do through the programs which we fund to address this. Thank you.
I thank the gentlelady. We'll next go to the gentlelady from California for any questions she cares to ask.
Mr. Secretary, in California alone, 5.6 million individuals need adult education services. However, under Title II of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, the state is only able to serve about 500,000 with adult education, skill training, and workforce preparation. Well, Congress intended Title II of the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act of WIOA to receive additional funding each year, and this is reflected in the legislation's graduating authorization levels. The budget request for WIOA Adult Education State Grant Program is only level funded from fiscal year 2016. Why has the administration chosen not to request funding that would allow adult education state grants to meet their full authorized amount under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act?
Yeah, again, this is a place where one of our challenges is how we pursue our priorities within the caps that were agreed to in last year's budget agreement. We do propose an increase in adult education funding because we think that's hugely important. We are working very closely with Department of Labor on WIOA implementation. The President also proposed on the mandatory side $5.5 billion that would be directed towards programs that are focused on adult education, training, disconnected youth, and trying to make sure our disconnected youth are connected to education and job readiness. And all of the mandatory proposals in the President's budget are paid for in the budget and would result in a net reduction in the deficit. So we do believe that that set of proposals that we've made jointly with the Department of Labor would get at exactly the issues that you're describing.
Okay. Well, let me just explain my frustration with the way this program is not being funded at the level that it should be. In my district alone, only 51.7% of my constituents 25 and older are high school graduates. So programs under the Adult Education State Grant Program, such as workplace literacy programs, English literacy programs, and civic education are absolutely essential. So I would again urge that the administration prioritize proven programs that are badly needed as opposed to unauthorized, untested proposals as it has a tendency to do when it presents its budget. In closing, I just want to associate myself with the ranking member's statement about the value and the importance of year-round Pell Grants. And I was pleased to see that the Pell for Accelerated Completion proposal was in the President's budget request because it really is critical. And in fact, the year-round Pell has a very strong return on federal investment.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I yield back.
Thank you, gentlelady. We'll next go to the gentleman from Maryland for whatever questions he'd care to ask.
Thank you very much. And first, I want to associate myself with the full committee of ranking members' comments on the anti-Semitism that prevails on some college campuses. And I would hope that, as the ranking member suggests, that since we fund a lot on those college campuses, we ought to have a say when they deny diversity because of your religious background, in this case, again, anti-Semitism. Let me go back to the Opportunity Scholarship Funds, because I just don't understand what the evidence is that these aren't scalable. I just don't. I mean, I'm not talking about doubling the program, but you can expand it 5, 10%. I mean, is it that there aren't schools to accept these students? Because I find that hard to believe. What's the evidence that it's not scalable?
Yeah. Well, the reality nationally is that there is not the private school capacity.
Mr. Secretary, we're not talking about nationally. We're talking about the District of Columbia. We're talking about the Opportunity Scholarship Program. What is the evidence in the District of Columbia that this program is not scalable? Because you do understand there have been more students in this program in the past. I mean, in fiscal year 2016 is the lowest number of students in the past 5 years in the program. So what's the evidence that it's not scalable?
Well, both nationally and in the District of Columbia, it is clear that private school capacity is not sufficient to replace the important role of public education. So our belief is that
Mr. Secretary,
the districts...
I'm going to have to interrupt you here. I'm not talking about replacing public education. I'm talking about an expansion of the program. I'm not talking about replacing public education. So we're going to have, if we're going to have a serious discussion, you can't set up a straw man that I'm suggesting replacing public education. What is the evidence that if we merely go back to the levels of 4 fiscal years ago, that we're not helping dozens of students who would otherwise not graduate based on the evidence? We have evidence. Yes, the public school system is getting better, but we have a 90% graduation rate in the OSP program. What's the evidence that it's not scalable to increase it by 10%? Is there evidence?
Well,
do you have evidence?
As we discussed, the original question was about student access to current funding. We will ensure that students are added in a way that spends current funding. A separate issue is the carryover, and our view on the carryover is that that should be preserved so that the students who are enrolled have the opportunity to complete their educational program within the schools that they're enrolled in. But we will add students this year. Don't know the precise number. That will depend on attrition and so forth to make sure that we're spending current dollars, and we'll preserve the carryover for the long term. If the question is, as a public policy matter, do we think it is a good idea to expand voucher programs? No, because we don't believe, as I said, that they're a scalable solution to the challenges we face, and would prefer to see those resources invested in public school choice, quality district and charter options.
Mr. Secretary, I fully get that. I'm just going to point to page 6 of your testimony where you say we extend our commitment to improving student outcomes by increasing funding for programs based on evidence of success. So let me summarize what you've said today. There's evidence that the graduation rate is higher, right? The IES study, yeah, graduation rate is higher. There is no evidence that it's not scalable to previous levels. None at all. Zero. You have no evidence of that. So when I read your testimony, you want me to believe that if you see the scientific study, which the IS, we could argue scientific study, based on evidence, you say you want to increase funding in your testimony, written testimony, but your verbal testimony is different. Let me just point out one issue with the program, is that if a poor family has tried to do right for their student and they've scraped by and they're working 2, 3 jobs to pay that private school tuition, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 in a lot of cases, they're not eligible for this. To be eligible for this program, is it true that their child would have to drop out of the school they're in to then enter the lottery to be eligible for funding, to go back into that same school? Because income is the prime determinant, but if you happen to be not in the public school system, you're not eligible for the lottery at this point in time. Is that a correct summary of the way things are run?
Well, the original intent of the program was to create opportunity for students who otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity. And so the funding is awarded in a way that respects that intent. Otherwise, you would have the risk of merely funding students who were already enrolled.
But these are all, I mean, let's get it straight. The income level is $22,000. To make a $7,000 or $8,000 payment to a school for tuition, you're scraping by. You're a parent who's trying to do what's right, and as usual, the government kind of punishes you for that. I get it, Mr. Secretary. I yield back.
Mr. Secretary, I was surprised, and this touches on a point that Ms. Roybal Allard made earlier, but I was surprised that your budget request included only $500 million for the newly authorized Student Support and Academic Enrichment State Grant. That's less than a third of the authorized level. The program's intended to be a flexible funding stream that allows states and school districts to invest in those areas that are most needed to improve the quality of education. So I was disappointed that the request seeks, I was also disappointed the request seeks to change the local allocations from a formula basis to a competitive basis, which would further shortchange many school districts and frankly, in my view, circumvents congressional intent. So again, I understand the resources are limited here, and it would be a challenge under any circumstances to fully meet the authorized level. But the funding it at the requested level seems to me to significantly curtail its potential usefulness to support school districts. Why does is it simply a math problem, a cap problem that we're this low on this? And again, it seems to me there are other areas where you've requested funding that frankly, I would rather see the money here in these kind of things than perhaps in some of the other areas. But I want to give you an opportunity to elaborate on that.
Sure. Again, we see this as a significant increase over the pre-existing program. So the 4 programs that were funded previously were only at 278. So taking it up to 500 is a significant increase. We do think there's an opportunity for more discussion in a bipartisan way about how to move forward with the Title IV program. The competitive grant component would be an option for states, so we're not proposing requiring states to make it competitive. But the concern, as I mentioned earlier, was if the formula delivers a grant that is just too small to do anything meaningful, then that's a missed opportunity. So we see this as an opportunity for states to identify priorities within the many available uses of Title IV dollars, and then to have a competitive process. States could weigh in that process, attention to rural issues. They could weigh in that process attention to perhaps pooling of resources across smaller districts. But we want to make sure that folks have an opportunity to advance the purposes of Title IV around a well-rounded education, school counseling, advanced placement courses, so forth.
Okay, well, thank you for the explanation. I'll go to my good friend from Pennsylvania next.
Yeah, I just want to circle back on this loan repayment thing. So I got my facts straight now. So in the portion of the Affordable Care Act that was entitled to Student Aid and Fiscal Responsibility, which was a separate bill altogether, we just included it on the train that was going along, and Senator Kennedy and former Chairman George Miller and others worked on this. It says basically that for new borrowers, starting in 2014, will be able to have their payments capped at 10% of their discretionary income. And that furthermore, that if for 10 years of public service work, they can have their loans forgiven, right? So this doesn't affect people who already have loans, who are already in the process, but it may be helpful for families and students who are matriculating through higher education now or contemplating it to understand that there will be a circumstance in which managing their debt would be a lot more plausible and even more affordable to the degree that they follow the others into public service. So I just want to make sure that the record's clear, and I think it'd be very helpful if the department could make sure that families know about this because, at least as for myself, I have a 17-year-old who's looking around at colleges, and, some of them are a little pricier than others, but it's an important consideration, I think, for families as to this. And I think even as we think about the Pell Grant, we also have to think about the other things that the Congress and the administration has done together, including the American Opportunity Tax Credit, which I was proud to author, but is another way where we are helping families, and many of them at incomes, in which they may not think they could get help, but they are receiving, dollar for dollar, a reduction on their higher ed costs up to $2,500. So I want to thank you. I'd be glad if you want to respond to that, you can.
Yeah, just I would say on the income-based repayment portion, there I think we've seen very significant growth. I think we're well over now 4 million folks who are participating in income-based repayment and see a path to adding many more. On the loan forgiveness, public service loan forgiveness, we'll get back to you with the details that we have on students participating now and what we project over the next few years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. You're recognized for whatever additional questions you'd care to pose.
No, I just want to thank the Secretary and welcome to the job. And as you have probably figured out, I have some passion for the Opportunity Scholarship Program. I think we really have to provide educational choice, and I think that the evidence is that when we do, everyone benefits. That I believe that the increased graduation rate in the public school system in D.C. is partly because there actually was an educational choice alternative. And I think that's part of the solution. And again, I hope to work with you in some way to be able to bring the numbers up to their historic numbers in that program. And, again, just give these children of low-income families a chance at the American dream. But thank you very much for coming before the subcommittee.
Thank you.
I'll recognize my good friend from Pennsylvania to make an additional point.
I met with the Secretary Height, Superintendent Height from Philadelphia yesterday, and he was focused, and I know this has been mentioned earlier, on this apprenticeship program. We had your counterpart, the Secretary of Labor, in last week, and we talked about apprenticeship efforts, and we have some wonderful programs in Philadelphia that have been federally funded. I know the chairman took some issue with that, but are doing great work to help young people who are not going to college, but to find their way into careers that allow them to make a living capable of raising families. So thank you, and just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, my friend. And first of all, Mr. Secretary, you got through the first one without too much problem, so
thank you.
Very fine job. Mr. Skelly, I want to join our ranking member of the full committee and just thank you for 42 years of wonderful service to help educate young people and put this country in the right direction. You got a wonderful career to be very, very proud of. You've earned your retirement. We probably kept you working for a few extra years since you put a child through Grinnell. Believe me, having gone there, that's an expensive proposition. So, but just thank you for your wonderful service to our country.
I agree. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, with that, we'll conclude the hearing. Mr. Secretary, again, it was great to have you.
Thank you.